I'm Erica Lukes, host of UFO Classified. For me, life isn't simply black and white. Life is full of many unknowns. It is my goal to travel the world and to work with the world's leading experts in the hopes of making groundbreaking discoveries. Join me on UFO Classified Friday nights at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, only on KCOR.
Turn left and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Well, happy Fantopia Friday, my friends. I'm Erica Lukes. I hope that you are all safe and sound during this turbulent time. I am coming to you from a beautiful Salt Lake City, and my guest this evening actually is from Utah, and I'm really looking forward to having a very intriguing and complex, exciting conversation with him tonight. He knows so much about a place that I have been researching for a long, long time and has new information that I'm quite sure most of you haven't heard with regard to Skinwalker Ranch and the Uinta Basin. Tonight I'm joined with Clyde Lewis, who is the incredible host of Ground Zero, which is the live stream is available Monday through Friday from 7 p.m. to 12 a.m. That's Pacific time on FM News 101 KXL, and that is located in Portland. Clyde has been in this game for a long time, since 1982. He's a parapolitical and paranormal news commentator with a diverse background in news, acting, writing, and he's a great writer, I have to say. He entertains and captivates his audiences across multiple platforms. He created Ground Zero in '95 in Salt Lake City and has produced Ground Zero programs online, on radio, and on television. He's appeared on Showtime specials with magicians Penn and Teller, as well as television programs Sighting, Strange Universe, and the Discovery Channel special Return to the Bermuda Triangle. He has been published in different UFO magazines and was featured in Rolling Stone. He is the model for characters in such books as Safe House by Andrew Vacas, Supernatural Law by Banton Lash, and Alien Invasion by Michael Tresca. And Clyde, first of all, I want to say thank you. I had a great time on your show the other night. That was one of the best interviews I've ever done.
Yeah, it certainly was a great interview. I think we're going to be rerunning it again this weekend for a best of, because it was so informative, and a lot of people were commenting, on Facebook, saying that we gave another side of the story that was definitely needed, because when it comes to the Skinwalker Ranch, we look at I don't know. It just seems like there's a monopoly, if you will, on a lot of the information, and that monopoly only is one-sided, and it seems that there are more complex and intricate things that the Skinwalker Ranch represents, and I think that it's always interesting how we can separate the UFOs from the lore, from the mythologies, from the legends and the urban legends they're trying to spin out of the ranch. And once again, it's like I've said the same thing about Roswell. There's Roswell, and then there's Roswell, and of course, Roswell, the bottom line is something happened there in 1947 that was enough to raise security suspicions. But from there come the tall tales and the legends and the different versions of the story that certainly are not true. But I mean, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, I guess.
You ain't kidding about that. And I mean, it has been interesting for me to start to kind of push things forward with the help of people like yourself, who you were there in the beginning, in '95, and were with important people that we'll talk about later. And you kind of watched all of that unfold. But it's interesting to see the resistance there is when you try to tell a story like this. It's either by people that feel that they should have the rights to all of this. It's people who are, this is my litter box, go away, my sandbox. Or then you've got the fact that it truly is, I believe there is a campaign to try to keep the truth from the public. about what is taking place, and it's really a fascinating thing to watch.
Well, that's the amazing thing about where we are now with investigations into UFOs and the paranormal and whatever else you're investigating. There's always somebody out there that is making money selling books and videos and all sorts of things. But then when certain data comes out that goes against their grain or whatever it is they're talking about, it's new findings or what have you, you just hear a stink from them saying, how dare you, we own rights to this story or whatever. No one owns rights to a story that's dealing with the paranormal. It'd be like copywriting, ghost voices. It just doesn't, it's just something that, for me, it's research. It's something that the public should have, they should have the decision on what they believe or what they hear is the truth, and ascertaining the discernment that needs to be done when you're investigating things like this. And I always tell people that most of the stories that you hear, are spiced up, or they have makeup on them or something, because usually when you're dealing with the paranormal, you're dealing with some of these things, they're pretty damn mundane. And it's fascinating these things are happening at all, but everybody seems to think they happen all the time, and nothing really happens on cue. Sometimes you come up empty-handed. Sometimes you have a moment where you have a repeating process that happens. That's I guess you could say, the banality of science, as well as the excitement that comes with the scientific inquiry and the hypothesis that happens, when you're dealing with this sort of thing. So Skinwalker Ranch is one of those, I believe, one of those situations that I've kind of illustrated, is that while it is a fascinating place, and while there are things that have happened there, it just doesn't happen on cue. And so most people, when they go there, think, well, whatever this, it's just some place out in the middle of nowhere. But in reality, there's a lot of things happening there that are fascinating and certainly need to be discovered and talked about.
Well, absolutely. And you grew up in Utah, and you've had some really interesting sightings. And I would love, if you don't mind, if you would share a couple of your experiences with the listening audience, because then they'll understand why you gravitated towards this subject.
Well, I mean, the most important thing, and we've had a discussion before when you did your investigation of the orange lights, the orange light phenomena, that when I was a kid, there were a number of things that happened near the Yoker Mountains, which I felt were interesting, only, because I was young and we were seeing a lot of UFOs, over the Yokers. I remember one night seeing those orange balls. You talk about those orange balls of light, and I didn't know what they were. They were certainly terrifying to see. But we also saw a UFO when we were kids. One time we were playing baseball out in my backyard, and we saw something in the sky that was cigar-shaped, and it was odd because our parents, they looked up, they saw it, and they just acted like it was a normal thing, and they just told us to come into the house. And I remember that well, and we had a number of people that, a number of old schoolmates of mine remembering that day. They called me and said, "You remember that day that we were all called into the house because of this UFO that was flying over?" And I said, "Yeah, I remember it." And so it's just, right now it's some vague memory, but it was bizarre that our parents seemed to be ill-affected or unaffected by it, and just telling us to come into the house and not look at this thing. So that was a weird experience too. And of course, a lot of the sightings that we've had over Antelope Island, which, of course, we can look at the test range out there near Dugway. That could be certainly the Eagle Test Range. You see it all on the way to Wendover as you're driving through Tooele County. You start seeing these things, and it's certainly eye-opening, especially when you get out to that desolate area of the Salt Flats, where the light pollution is gone, and it's just you and the desolate area and the stars, and you start seeing some very remarkable things.
And that is it's a beautiful area, and there are lots of reports that both of us have received over the years. I remember, about 8 years ago, I was in contact with a security police fellow at the airport, Salt Lake International Airport, and he would talk about some of the reports and the sightings that he had while he was on duty. And he said that, there were several people that he worked with that were very aware of these amber orange balls of light.
Mm-hmm.
And I have reports of different pilots who were coming into to land at Salt Lake International and some of the smaller airports, and same types of things. So it really is curious. But how do you differentiate what is, like you said, we've got the Utah Test and Training Range, all of these areas. We've got a lot of potential for man-made stuff. So how do you differentiate?
It's difficult. In fact, what was odd is I remember when I was growing up, because my father and several of his friends were pretty much all talking together at the barbershop about, this type of stuff. And I remember hearing about the black helicopters. And I thought, well, we have them out here all the time. That can't be what they're talking about, because I remember seeing black helicopters when I was a kid. And then I realized, of course, well, the black helicopters were coming out of places like Camp Williams, or they were coming out of the military installations out of Dugway and Hill Air Force Base and all these places. And so I started realizing that, well, maybe the black helicopters have some sinister purpose, but we see them all the time. When I grew up in Kearns, the Kearns area, because of course we know that Kearns used to be an old World War II housing facility. Most of the people that remember Camp Kearns from World War II, and just up the street from me was Bacchus Works, where they were making the Minuteman missiles, and they were making also the MX. So, I mean, I was raised, it was almost like, welcome to the Cold War, everything UFO, everything nuclear, everything, it all comes together, living in the Kearns, Magna, Granger, Hunter area, and that's exactly, what it was. And so I would see these things all the time, and it was something I was used to, but the rest of the country, did not understand why they were being harassed by, black helicopters or some sort of experimental aircraft or whatever was going on. And it was funny. One of the things that inspired me the most about UFOs was some of the things I saw flying out of Hill Air Force Base, and thinking to myself, this looks like some sort of alien technology. And of course, some of the Janet flights, many people don't know this. If they're not dispatched out of Las Vegas, they're dispatched out of Hill Air Force Base. So, we see a lot of things in Utah many times that we don't understand. They could be military, but of course, that's intermingled with other things that we haven't been able to understand or talk about or even try to explain, because it's just too bizarre. And Utah is one of those hot spots that certainly you see UFOs all the time, because once again, it's a desert state, and you don't have to go too far outside of Salt Lake City or even Salt Lake County to see some of these anomalies.
Well, and that's true, and thank you for sharing that with me. It's funny to me because I was the state director for Utah MUFON, and I was always shocked that there were so few sightings that were getting reported in Utah. And I looked back, historically, and we had a really small percentage. And even, my friend Barry Greenwood, who's a world-renowned historian, an archivist, I mean, he would try to find things about Utah. And there were very few things that you could really get your hands on. And now looking back at that, I have to wonder if places like MUFON, the reporting centers, if they purposefully scrubbed those sightings because they actually were tests of some sort.
Well, and that could be it. I do know, though, that one of the more famous UFO cases was in Tremonton, and that was in the 1960s. And Tremonton was there was also a lot of sightings in Carbon County and Logan. And so, like I said, going outside of Salt Lake County, you don't have to go too far. I mean, Springville, I remember when I was a kid, Springville was always said to be some strange area where weird things happen. And, and even Provo was considered a strange place, not just because of BYU, but because of, sorry, I had to put a dig in there. I'm a Ute, true and true, red-blooded.
Me too.
Ute.
I hear you.
But that's something that I always remember when I was growing up, and of course, going to Springville gave me the chills because of that. And Gadianton, that area there, I guess Modena, Utah, has been known for being I guess you could call it a time portal, where there was a famous story of these women, and I think it was in the 1980s or something, that they drove through a time warp and wound up at a bar where there were werewolves sitting there drinking beer. Or something that looked like to that effect, and they were chasing them in egg-shaped cars that were three-wheeled with big lights on them. These are some of the strange stories that I remember, growing up as a kid, in Utah.
Well, that's cool. We're gonna have to get together. Maybe we should write a book together with some of the sightings. Because it is really interesting. And then you've got Skinwalker Ranch on top of it in the Uinta Basin, which has been studied for decades. And you've got people like Frank Salisbury, who did you interview Dr. Salisbury?
Yeah, Salisbury and Junior Hicks both. I had the opportunity to interview them. I was thanks to at the time, Mildred Beasley, who was the head of MUFON when I was just starting in the 1990s. She was an older lady, and she had this love-hate relationship with me because I was kind of like the Utah spokesperson at the time, but I was also a loose cannon. I was young and deciding that I was.
There's a shocker.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, it's like. I mean, now I'm more refined. I'm like a fine wine that's getting older every day. But I'm just saying, at the time, I was pretty, reckless and just doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And I even offered $10 million for proof of a UFO, and Mildred kind of went, "Oh my God, what is this kid doing?" But we had some moments where we were very serious about what was happening, especially Skinwalker Ranch. When we first heard the story from Zach Van Eck back. The Deseret News, Frequent Flyers was the name of the article, and it was really interesting how Zach reached out to me. I had never had I guess you could call it a news journalist that was definitely a real well-known, credited journalist reaching out to me and saying, "We need somebody who can talk about this and bring to light what's going on with Terry Sherman and his wife Gwen." And I it was kind of one of those things where the responsibility fell on me, and I was a little nervous because I thought, I've covered Crime Beat, I've covered politics, I've covered everything when I was working for Metro News and working for I was an affiliate relations reporter for CNN because we were CNN affiliate, and I thought, but I'm doing something here that I love. Doing something here that I would consider like a hobbyist type of thing. How do I approach this and still sound credible? And I had to follow the lead of Zach because Zach was one of those guys that could do that. But in the process, though, you pick up on kind of like a magnet. And you pick up on all the strange filaments that come after you, and you have people, characters that come out of the woodwork like Ryan Layton and others that were, involved in the beginning. And you wonder what to think of them, and then others who come forward and want to talk. And then, of course, there was a situation where I don't know who it was. I think it was somebody affiliated with Tom Barberi, or others affiliated with him back in the days of call radio. They wanted to do an interview with the Shermans, and something went south, and it turned out that he was just totally burned out on it, and he didn't want to talk anymore. And then for the longest time, I pulled away and didn't want to talk anymore about it either. And I guess that was probably a big mistake, because then you have people like George Knapp, and you have others that basically, Colm Kelleher and others that were taking the reins and saying, well, now we are going to take this over. We are going to be the ones that are giving you the information. And then Robert Bigelow, of course, as we have indicated, was the man behind the curtain that was basically pulling the levers, and pulling the chains, and this whole operation just became, this what next? And there was really nothing more than talking about what the Shermans went through, and then it just stopped there.
It's interesting because the Shermans, I mean, there's some people that think that they were just trying to make all of this up for, to get more money out of their property. When I was up at I interviewed Junior Hicks the last time, he said that Bigelow, and this is what Junior alleges, that Bigelow actually was responsible for getting Mrs. Sherman fired from the bank. And I've also heard from other people that they were trying to squeeze him out of his property. And there were some things going on that could kind of shown a different light than maybe what was being presented. I also, strangely enough, had a woman walk into my Pilates studio who was a client, and she was friends with one of the Sherman's children growing up. And she remembers a specific time where the whole family was absolutely terrified, and they were covered in little, almost like burns. And so there's some interesting things, I think, that have gone on behind the scenes, and then they forced to sign a non-disclosure, different things. But what is your take on all of that?
Well, I remember, and I don't know, and like I say, a lot of this, happened 25 years ago, but I remember that the Shermans sold the ranch for only $100,000. And it was unloaded so quickly, and the deal was done so discreetly that no one really could follow, the bill of sale or any of that. It was just something just all of a sudden, was there to silence and to shut down anything and everything that was coming out of Duchesne. And I was like, well, okay. And so usually, when that happens, you just kind of let it go, and you hope that something comes up where you can say, "Ooh, okay, I've got this." But really, I mean, there was like maybe, I don't know, back in the day, 2 or 3 shows, maybe 4 shows I did about Skinwalker Ranch. That was about it. And I was thinking, after Bigelow stepped in and the ranch was sold and all that, nothing more from it. And it was really frustrating because there was no real connection until after Renee Barnett came to me, who was a producer of many of the shows we were seeing on the networks regarding UFOs, from Sightings to Strange Universe, Current Affair, all these TV shows that dealt with what they would call in the business tabloid type of stories, where that's where this all fell into, as a tabloid. Renee Barnett had sought after me, and also Zach and several others, to go out and try to figure out what was happening. And, they went out there, and they were saying that they felt that something was off, and they felt that they weren't getting the type of information they would hope to get, and that it just seemed like there was something that was being covered up by the National Institute of Discovery Science, and that was, and then again, roadblock. You couldn't talk about it, you couldn't get involved with it, and there was a time where I was only getting information from Colm Kelleher, and that was it. And I realized that the monopoly of the story, or the basically turning it into a monopoly, became the precedent. It became the standard, and it was ubiquitous. And I was just like, okay, I'm not someone who's experienced in trying to, and I didn't have the lawyers or the wherewithal to just say, okay, I'm going to get tough. I stopped being tough and just let it go.
Wow. And I want to talk more about that and the Colm Kelleher thing when we get back. I'm Erica Lukes here with Clyde Lewis. You can listen to Ground Zero Monday through Friday night, 7 p.m. to 12 a.m. on FM News 101 KXL. We will be right back.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified. UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this. You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to UFO Classified. I want to thank all of my friends in chat who get out there and support me and ask very intelligent and thoughtful questions. As all of us know, and we've seen over the past year, especially with all of the Skinwalker Ranch revelations coming out, we have to be very dedicated to finding the truth, and we have to be smart enough to understand that what we're seeing in the UFO community is anything but. In fact, it's kind of a comedy showcase, to be frank. But I want to thank all of you for supporting the show. This is a listener-supported show, and your contributions have meant a lot to keep me on the air, so thank you. I'm here tonight with somebody that I've known for a long time and have been fortunate enough to have exchanged stories about some of the things that we both experienced here in Utah. Clyde Lewis is with me. He is a powerful voice in parapolitical and paranormal news. He is host of Ground Zero, which is an incredible show. I had the fortune to be on there last week, and you can really, really great interview. So I will post the links to that. But Clyde, thank you so much for being here. And you were right there when all of the things started to happen with the Shermans. And you were mentioning in the last segment that Zach Van Eck, who worked for the Deseret News at the time and wrote the first articles on Skinwalker Ranch, that he reached out to you to see if you could try to get this out more publicly. And that was before the ranch was sold, right?
Yeah, it was before the ranch was sold. I was very surprised at how fast everything went down, because we barely were able to talk about the kind of the Amityville horror aspects of this whole thing. And right when we were getting into talking about some of the activity, it was shut down. All of the information coming out of that area was shut down. And so there was no way for us to talk about anything with any credibility because of that fact. And it was frustrating, and everybody stepped in to try and, filter out or filter the news that was coming out there. And it was all when the National Institute of Discovery Science got a hold of the story, got a hold of the ranch, and then Bigelow. And at the time, what was interesting about Robert Bigelow was that Robert Bigelow was like this mysterious guy. No one knew who he was. No one saw him. It was almost like he was a non-person. That it was like Robert Bigelow was this name that people gave to this benefactor that was putting money into shows like Coast to Coast AM and getting behind many of the people you heard on Coast to Coast AM, and also pushing the issue of this the story of the Skinwalker Ranch, and then stopping all of the information just all at once. So it was almost like we don't want anything else to get out. We want to shut everything down. And so people like me and Zach and others were completely baffled and befuddled. We didn't know what to do with it, and so we kind of thought the story would die, and it kind of did. I don't think a lot of people knew about Skinwalker Ranch, and then the revival came along a few years ago when we started seeing people like Jeremy Corbell and people like George Knapp and others, bringing out this information, and then it got to the point where I tried to step forward, and several other people saying, well, we were here first, Renee Barnett and me and Zach and all these people saying we were here first. And that was shut down like, well, no, you don't have a right to give this information. You don't have a right to report this information. We have the right to this story. And I'm thinking, since when does anybody have a right to a story that anyone else can tap into and talk about? And it's gotten worse, I think, since Knapp's book came out, because then there were plenty of people that wanted to jump on the story. There was a movie, a fictitious movie that was released, that I interviewed the people that were involved with that film because it was kind of an interesting horror take. I think they were one of the first to do a horror movie about it, which I thought was an interesting effort because I love B horror films. But and then it was after that that everything started getting into, well, we know this and we know this, and the ranch was a place of horror and UFOs since the 1800s. And I'm thinking, was the ranch even around at the time? That's the thing, is that now it's been spun because they want to sell. They want to sell this new series, and they especially, I think, took liberties in Project Blue Book, the TV show, where they go back to the 1950s as if it's some significant, UFO. It was some significant UFO story prior to the 1990s. It wasn't anything until the 1990s, till 1995. But to give it this historical, background going back to 1952 or 1952 would it be, because of course it was around the time the UFOs were seen over Washington. But it's the idea that pushing this as an anomaly. It's been around since the 1950s. Is like saying that when Roswell happened, all of the parts for the spacecraft that crashed there all went to Area 51, when Area 51 didn't even exist. And people are talking about, well, they sent all that stuff to Area 51, right? No, they sent it to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But who knows anything about history? It's like,
highly overrated. Come on.
Yeah, history is overrated. I mean, and even when you try to correct people, they look at you like you're, like you're being they just look at you like you're some sort of jerk that is trying to ruin their parade, ruin their party. And I'm like, I'm a history person, and I'd love to keep the history intact. And I've talked about this. I expressed this with Donald Schmidt when I was in Roswell. I said, listen, you need to remember, and you need to keep, you need to keep this story as pure as you can. I mean, it's like Stanton Friedman. He always tried to keep the story as clean and as down to earth as possible. And now Stanton's gone. It's up to Donald Schmidt to do that. And and some of these old voices that wish to keep everything pure and unfettered are leaving us now. And so you'll have all these people that certainly want to sensationalize the story. And I guess that's the evolution of what's happening. But I'm not one to allow the evolution to become, so weird that it becomes, monkey business.
Right. And I think that's been one thing that I've been saying on most of my shows. It's like we're at a really critical point, because all of these older people that have been studying this for decades and have all of the research with them, they're donating research, they're throwing it away. It's going to places where we might not have access to it. And then you've got this young generation of YouTubers and people that appear out of nowhere to spin stories. And so you don't have a really good place where we can get the history out as told by the people that were there, the credible people and things like that. And I really do fear, and I see that the powers that be are trying to rewrite the history of the subject.
Well, and one of the things I always tell people is, if you want to find the most sensational writers and producers of this stuff, all you have to look at who's making the most money, because there's no money in the truth. And so if you're trying to give the truth, you know that you're the one that's probably going to be standing on the side with your little sign say we'll investigate UFOs for food or money or whatever. All the others that are selling out these auditoriums are the ones that are lying and doing the most damage to the UFO community. And I'm not going to name any names, but I'm sure many of us know who these people are. The others are just, following along, and eventually they come to the realization and they get all betrayed and burned out, and they shut it down. And so there are a lot of people that are doing damage to this subject matter, and it just irritates me, because I look at them and everybody says, well, it's just jealousy, right? No, it's not jealousy at all. It's just that I wonder sometimes if people understand, if they're putting their hard-earned dollars into giving these people a forum, then and then you realize that what they're talking about is pure bunk. Then they walk away being all betrayed, thinking, well, there's nothing to UFOs. It's all a bunch of nonsense. And that's what irritates me, because no, there are serious people out there with serious stories, like the Shermans and others, that have had these stories pretty much bastardized for the sake of money, for the sake of selling TV shows, T-shirts, and all this other stuff. And it just really begins to grate on the senses for those of us who are serious investigators who at the time were those young, out of control people that learned that no, you take these things seriously and you give them respect. But it just seems that's lost on a lot of people who want to cash in on the UFO craze.
Well, I mean, and there are lots of interesting factors to them. And you get people that are, I think, lonely. You get people that might have some issues, mental health issues. You have, people that are there to capitalize on that. People not only for their own monetary gain, but then you have the disinformation agents that are there to keep the stories spinning. So the truth is just a dangling carrot in the wind. And it has been really curious for me to step back and watch all of this. And I very rarely speak at conferences anymore because I just don't want, I don't want to be involved with some of these people or in that crowd. I don't feel it's right to promote things that can't be verified. And I think it's actually dangerous.
Yeah, it can be. And I always make when people say to me things like, well, I want to give you this information, but I'm afraid the government's going to get me. I always tell them, well, you know what, let's kind of put that aside and realize that the Cold War's over. And, there's no information about UFOs that's going to be so I guess you could call it damning that you're going to be hunted down by the government and killed. It's just not the case. I mean, there's so many things about UFOs now that are declassified. Area 51, declassified. All these things are declassified. That's one of the reasons why they're so normal now. It's not like it's something that used to be unique for people. People are seeing UFOs all the time. People are opening up about them now. 30 years ago, I'd say, yeah, you run the chance of getting into trouble. I mean, I had my car bombed because I had some prospector give me a picture of what looked like an alien or whatever in the West Desert. And, back then it was like, I didn't even think that it'd be something to silence me, but it was there to scare me. And I've lived through that, but now I don't feel at all if I'm going to be giving some information that somebody's going to come after me. And, everybody says, well, if the guy is silenced, then obviously he's telling the truth. Well, not necessarily. I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's those people that say, I have this information, I'm being harassed. Well, you're being harassed because probably you're lying or you're full of crap.
Right. But I have to say in my own defense that we have been harassed, but that's because we're not talking about UFOs. We're talking about potentially non-lethal weapons testing on.
Well, yeah. I mean, why? Because that's something that's still, one of the reasons I found out why my car was bombed. It was because I had a number of soldiers that came from Camp Williams. They were dressed in civilian clothes. And they came to me and they said, what you have in that picture is a camouflage testing that's going on in the West Desert, and that's a soldier. And they want you to take it down because you're exposing something secret. And yeah, you will be hunted down if you're exposing something secret and they don't want you to know about it. But not about UFOs. It's about, like you say, energy weapons. It's secret stuff that they don't want you to know about now. That's intricate to the security of the country, that's intricate to the security of what they're doing. And yeah, I mean, if you've got that, but most people are saying, well, I know something about the UFO phenomena, and they act all secretive about it. I'm like, well, why are you so secretive about it? Well, because my life is at stake here. Oh, really? Okay, tell me who is after you, and we'll talk about it. And they can't seem to tell me who's after them. They just know they're sought after because of their UFO information. And I'm thinking, well, UFO information is not that unique anymore, so I don't understand why you're acting this way. But when you're talking about things like what you said, like direct energy weapons and non-lethal weapons and experiments that certainly are being done barely legally, you will find yourself in a situation where someone will want you to shut down and shut up, or they'll threaten you. And that's the thing, is that that if something like that is happening, that somebody is up to nefarious activities, or they're doing things that certainly would not look good on a docket in an assessment, advanced assessment, threat assessment type of document that's being sequestered or being silenced by the Pentagon. So yeah, I understand that, but right. UFOs, probably not.
I love that. Okay, thank you. And so I want to go back to, you mentioned Mildred Beasley, and I always wish that I could have met her. What was she doing with regards to researching or trying to find out more about the ranch?
Well, she was the one that would give me the information. Pretty much, it went all the way back to the Salisbury Hicks, connection with the Utah UFO display, and that that's where it all began. And it also was something that a guy by the name of Wolfgang Gossett, who was one of the first paranormal radio show guys. He did a paranormal radio show on KCGL back when it was a talk radio station in the old days, and he would tell me about the area in the Uinta Basin where he said he felt it was a sort of a time vortex, or a what he'd call a Rosenbridge, Einstein Rosenbridge. And I didn't know what that was. I was 14 at the time. I didn't know what it was. But as far back as when I was 14 years of age, I was hearing about the strange activities going on in the Duchesne area, the Uinta Basin, Uinta County, and it was just interesting at first. I didn't know what to think because you're young and being told this, but then I vaguely remember this, and then of course Mildred Beasley talked about how not necessarily the ranch, but the whole area there was some sort of a it's been this UFO hotspot. It's been strange activity hotspot. Strange things happen in the area. And I went to Vernal when I was a kid. My parents took us out to Vernal and Strawberry and all these other places out there. And it felt like it was kind of a weird area. I felt a weird vibe when I was there, and when I was a young kid. I mean, young kid of 8 or 9 years old, going to Vernal and in places like that out there, and realizing that there was something about this place that was just eerie and strange. So, it's been with me since I was a kid, but not necessarily putting two to two together. I just certainly want to know more about the ranch, and she was giving me information and updates that, I could talk about, but it was just hard to put together something solid that would fill a 2-hour show. Only it would be speculation and not much truth. And so I didn't want to, just go off on speculation alone. I wanted to be able to get some concrete stuff. And I never interviewed the Shermans. It was one of those things. I never had a chance to interview them because by the time, I had talked on the phone and stuff, but I never really had him in the studio, or Gwen or anybody else in the studio, because it just got to a point where he didn't want to talk to the press.
And how quickly did all of that evolve from the time that Zach's article took place, the time that Bigelow came in and kind of shut everything down?
It seemed like months, like a month or two. It didn't, if I recall, it just went quickly. I mean, it could have been a year, but time flies when you're looking back. But I would say that it didn't take long, because I remember just after I had my interview with Colm Kelleher, things started drying up. And I felt like I was getting a scoop talking to Kelleher, and getting that information. But, after, the news crews came out and the special, groups coming out from like Strange Universe and A Current Affair and all these other things, they started to dry up the stories. And so they were just getting, the stories were given, and that's as far as they went. They didn't go any further.
And were the stories that were given, were they pretty much what we saw in Hunt for the Skinwalker?
Yeah. I mean, just the idea that, I remember, and this is my account, I remember hearing that the Shermans were being plagued with, poltergeist activity, bloody noses, being awakened in the middle of the night by strange sounds, hearing voices at the ranch, things in a different language. I heard the story of like these portals opening up and big men that looked like Shaquille O'Neal with bald heads, black muscular guys coming out. I heard the cattle mutilation story, the shooting of would be a dire wolf looking type creature that they put bullets in, and the thing just kept on coming back. It wouldn't die. All the stuff that's been talked about before. And in reality, looking at what's being talked about now, all that stuff is being kind of thrown by the wayside for the UFO focus. And that's the thing that I think is unfortunate, because there's such a rich story in the Skinwalker alone that just throwing the UFOs into the mix cheapens it, I think. I mean, they saw some lights. They saw something that looked like a boxcar with a light on it that landed, that sort of thing. But I just think that in this situation, when you're talking about something as interesting as the Skinwalker itself and the heritage that it has with the Utes and the Navajo, I just think that the UFO thing is far more sensationalizing the story rather than digging deep to find out just what's underneath the ranch, what's going on, why people are getting sick there, why you have these different types of electromagnetic waves that come out of that area. I mean, these are things that need to be, I think, looked at more so than the UFO angle.
And I absolutely agree. And it was interesting when I've interviewed both Chris Marks and Chris Bartell, who spent 6 years living on the property. They mentioned that they weren't seeing structured craft. They weren't seeing UFOs. It was about going to specific locations on the ranch, hearing voices, having being in the trailer and hearing a person walk across the floor when there's nobody there, or perhaps seeing maybe holographic images or just different things. And so it really didn't equate to the UFO thing. But when I'm looking back at the reports now, and like I mentioned on your show the other night, I've got a few years there and looking at, doing a map and looking at the specific places. Okay, this is where the balls of light appeared. This is where you heard voices. This is where, all of these things took place. I mean, it's interesting. There was not a place like that for UFO sightings. And, I look back at, the Utah UFO display and the work that Salisbury and Hicks did. And there were a lot of sightings in the Uinta Basin, but I don't really know if there are any in that book that were seen in that specific area.
No, and they're making it sound like that specific area is just a hotbed of UFO activity. And I can tell you now, it's not. It's a yawner for UFO activity. I mean, when I went there, I was expecting seeing, the way they talked it, it's some Disneyland for UFO people. It really isn't. It's just this very quiet, very interesting place that's in the middle of nowhere, but in a neighborhood. And it's kind of like this odd juxtaposition of having this ranch and then have all of these houses surrounding the ranch. And you're thinking to yourself, how many people in that area near the ranch have seen anything? What have they experienced? I'd like to hear what they have to say because, when I was there, I saw nothing except for some piezoelectric lights that I thought were interesting, because they were, flashes of light that were going on in the I would say the high grass or whatever that was, or weeds or whatever that's down there that seems to blow around in the wind a bit and creating this static charge, I think. But as far as the other people that are in the area, and I remember too, and this is a thing that rarely gets talked about with the Skinwalker Ranch, I had heard, and this was a story that, we kind of touched on but didn't really push it, that the Shermans were actually using water that the tribes were saying, hey, what are you guys doing? This is our stuff. And they were defiant, and that's why the Skinwalker came to the ranch. That's why the ranch was haunted, was because there were medicine men that didn't take too kindly the way the Shermans were treating the tribes. And so they basically conjured a Skinwalker to come out and basically scare them.
Well, it just keeps getting more interesting by the day. Wow. And we have got so much more to talk to you about. I am Erica Lukes. I'm here with Clyde Lewis, and you can check him out on Ground Zero. It's an incredible show. I'll be posting links for that. You can go to UFO Classified as well to learn more about my guest. We will be right back.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows, visit her website at ufoclassified.com. UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the second half of UFO Classified. I'm happy to be here on KCOR. I want to thank all of my friends, Northern UFOs, everybody that gets into chat and really makes Friday evenings a delight for me. I have a respectful, wonderful group of people that support the show, and I want to thank you for that. UFO Classified is a listener-supported show. For many, many years, I have paid for my show because I believe in getting the truth out there to the public. That's simply not happening. But over the past couple of years, it has been really great. I've had lots of wonderful people who have dedicated money to keep the show on the air, and I appreciate you immensely. Thank you. As you know, I, over the past few months, have been doing a series of stories unfolding about Skinwalker Ranch and the Uinta Basin and some of the people involved at Bigelow. And we have really uncovered some things and have been asking some hard questions that for some reason other people who have had a different narrative have not been willing to address, or maybe they did for 2 seconds, but now that the spotlight is really getting bright in regard to weapons testing and the toys, quote unquote, that were deployed on the ranch and around the ranch, now we're starting to see certain people coming out in the media and saying, oh no, this wasn't weapons testing, that's ridiculous, yada yada. Same old song and dance, but we know we're onto something, and so just keep digging and make sure you don't buy the story that they're trying to push down your throats. My guest this evening is a person who doesn't do that. I was on his show, an excellent show, Ground Zero, last week talking about Skinwalker Ranch. Clyde Lewis is from Utah and has had several personal UFO experiences and has heard really cool stories about different parts of Utah, and I love that. I think I suggested that we should write a book about Utah UFOs. I think that would be really, really cool, and we'll have to do that. But Clyde, we've talked a lot about, you were one of the first people that was really in touch with this story as it was unfolding with the Shermans, and you had contact with Kelleher and different things, and then you saw that it was getting shut down really, really quickly, and which is just fascinating to me. You wonder what that's about. And you also mentioned the Shermans potentially using the water from the tribes, and there was a curse, and so lots of interesting stuff. But I want to ask you, when did you first get in contact with Colm Kelleher, and how did all of that play out?
It was like, I think weeks, just a few weeks after Zach Van Eck contacted me, and I think that I got the Colm Kelleher connection through Renee Barnett, and because she was very impressed with what we were doing on Ground Zero, and see, this is the thing about the Skinwalker Ranch. That was my first real story about something paranormal happening in my own backyard, and of course, I mean that 80 miles away, 90 miles away from where I lived, but it's like this is as close as you get to a major, and I knew at the time that this would be a major paranormal story, that it would be it'd be comparable to Roswell or Rendlesham or any of those things. And I was thinking, I don't want to screw this up. I don't want to screw this up. I don't want to screw this up because I'm going to be the guy that everybody's going to remember, discovered this. It was Zach Van Eyck. But it didn't happen that way. And mainly because of the fact that just after, all of the, Utah excitement had died down, that was when Bigelow stepped in and Colm Kelleher stepped in and National Institute of Discovery Science stepped in and said, okay, we're taking over now. And it just got to the point where, at first everybody was excited to tell you about it and then no one would return your calls. And I'm going like, why would no one want to return calls with something as big as this? And it's because, you basically silence the media. You don't give anything to the media. You throw a gag order on the media, and then they have their times to plot and to talk about, what's going on, put in their equipment, do whatever they're going to do. And then, we were hearing that this was like the paranormal Area 51, not necessarily the UFO Area 51, but the paranormal, type of Area 51 where experiments were going on, and it started sounding like a Montauk story where everything was, I thought, wow, it's another Camp Hero, and that they're doing experiments, remote viewing, you name it, it was being done at the ranch, and it got to a point where I was thinking, none of that, not all of that could be going on at this little place. Why would they do all that? But then now, as it's aged, and the story is older and it's 25 years old, things start surfacing from people who are willing to talk, and now Vice got a hold of it. I was reading a story in Vice over it. Newsweek just published a story about it. So now again, like the Nimitz Tic Tac stories, this is now getting legs, and it'll once again get this national attention because of the connections to or the alleged connections to the $22 million that was set aside for UFO investigations, and Harry Reid's connection, and all these things we're hearing about now.
And that's a good story in and of itself. All of the connections and things that go way back, way before the ranch and things. And I'm sure if you did some digging, you'd find some curious connections there for sure, financial perhaps. But, with regard to all of this, the thing that's kind of puzzled me is they've said we had to keep the UFO thing a secret because we'd be laughed at, but yet they were the ones that were front and center promoting that narrative. And so it makes sense.
Oh my God, you're so right. It was like, I remember at first it was not a UFO story. It was not ever a UFO story. That was the sideline. It was Mildred Beasley contacted me and saying, well, the Skinwalker Ranch is an anomaly all to itself, but if you really want to know the secrets of the UFOs that are happening over the Uinta Basin, because when we were kids, we were told that Bigfoot hung out in the Uinta Basin. We were told that Bigfoot was in the Uintas, Mirror Lake. Bigfoot showed up all the time. So that was another thing. It was Bigfoot territory. It was Skinwalker territory. It was all these areas that were like these legendary, tribal cryptids that were there, and of course the UFOs that were there. And then Skinwalker Ranch was like this terrifying place for, poltergeist. It was like the movie Poltergeist. You're expecting, this little midget lady showing up going, go to the light. We were just, that's what we thought of when we were thinking of Skinwalker Ranch, not UFO hotspot, not UFOs landing in the front yard wanting to, talk to somebody. It was just a matter of something weird and wicked and satanic, seriously, satanic going on at Skinwalker Ranch. Like it was some sort of it's like they built the ranch over the bodies and moving the tombstones rather than, it was all of that. And then, of course, they were saying, well, there's no UFOs involved here, nothing to see here. And now they're using that narrative to cover up something. I'm thinking now it's like that narrative is the narrative going back. And I remember they were doing the promotion for the History Channel show. This since the 1800s, local tribes talking about UFO activity in the area of the Skinwalker Ranch. And I'm like going, no, they never did. I mean, you grew up in Utah. I grew up in Utah. We never heard that the Skinwalker Ranch was something that was talked about by the tribes, until after 1995. I mean, 1995 is when it all started. It had nothing to do with, the tribal legends or the UFOs or anything. It was all about this ranch where this couple was being harassed and harangued by extra forces that no one knew about. And it was paranormal. It had nothing to do with UFOs.
Well, and the thing that is so interesting to me, I mean, obviously there are the same players involved in this. They got the 22 million that have been, blah 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 here and there, and now it's about you've got To the Stars, and now it's UFOs and they're a threat. It's a threat. It's a threat, and we need to dedicate money for studying this. And I mean, the more I sit back and look at this, I really think this doesn't look to me like it has anything to do with UFOs. And not one person has provided solid evidence to say that 22 million went to studying UFOs. None.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is that, we don't know. And here's the thing, too. Here's a name that nobody uses that also had an interest in what I was talking about and had an interest in what was going on, and that is Joe Firmage. You everybody remember that name?
Yeah, I do. Yep.
Joe Firmage was the guy who all of a sudden came out of the woodwork, and they called him the Fox Mulder of Silicon Valley. And he and I would talk all the time about this. I was hoping that he would throw some of his money at me. I really did. I thought, you know what? This Joe Firmage guy seems like he's got the moxie to go ahead and do this. And he basically quit his job. He wanted to look more into the UFOs. I think his father was, I don't remember who his father was exactly. I remember hearing his father's name long before he came along.
Ed Firmage, I believe he was
Ed Firmage, exactly, Ed. Yeah. And so Joe was on my show all the time talking about, he had this interest in UFOs, advanced technology, and everything else. And this was before I even heard of Bigelow. And then all of a sudden Bigelow comes along and I go, wait a minute, whatever happened to Ed Firmage, or whatever happened to Joe Firmage? What happened to Joe? And to this day, I still ask myself, what happened to Joe Firmage? Why is it that Joe Firmage came out of the woodwork interested in, gravitics and warp drives and all these things and UFOs, and no one talks about him anymore? Now, why is that? Why is it that he got buried and the Bigelow NIDS situation took all the credit for the Skinwalker Ranch? And that's another name that I decided to dig out of the woodwork for everybody, because I don't know if anybody even knew who Joe Firmage was.
He's actually there's been a bit of controversy about him and some of his former business dealings and things as of late. And that's an interesting story, that one of those that I'm just like, I think I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole. Mm-hmm. So but it is interesting, some of the business connections that we see here in Utah, and what were people really looking at? Was it technology? Was it UFOs? Lots of interesting things. And I think, as we know, we here in Utah, we love the military. We love our contractors, and we have some of the largest we've got more probably contractors, aerospace contractors and defense contractors than a lot of other places in the country, which I find very interesting too. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. The more I really look at the 22 million and I read the solicitation sheet for OSAP, I mean, nobody can tell me that has anything to do with UFOs. And the people that are saying that it does, right, they're the people that are getting tips from anonymous sources, or they're being shown secret documents for 2 seconds, or, whatever. And so there's really no verifiable proof to me as of yet.
Well, one of the things that sparked my interest as well, between Joe Firmage and Robert Bigelow and everything else, was this insatiable need to, this vital urgency, if you will, to open a new frontier in aerospace. It was this idea that, here it had nothing to do with NASA, had nothing to do with the European Space Agency. It had everything to do with these private groups, whether it be Joe Firmage or Robert Bigelow, pushing for this aerospace stuff. And here they were, in Nevada, in Utah, and of course we had Morton Thiokol there, and that's probably the only connection I think that I could think of besides rocketry at Bacchus. Bacchus Works, it was up the street from where I lived. Between Bacchus and Morton Thiokol and maybe some of the stuff going on at Dugway, there really wasn't anything that would be considered aerospace. But then you start looking at some of these places out there in Wendover, where, out in Wendover, they could set up some sort of shop and no one would find it because it's such a vast area of, wasteland out there. And I started getting a little bit, interested in, Wendover and what you see on the road to Elko and all these other places around Nevada. And then, of course, Harry Reid then comes into the picture and all these other people come into the picture. And you start thinking to yourself, okay, there's a secret space program, some sort of secret space program where people like Joe Firmage and Robert Bigelow are involved. And that's the story, is that, you have like Radiant Guardian, you've heard of that, or, some of the other, I guess you could call them, Space Warden, or, these types of secret space programs that allegedly exist. And then you get stories of, off-planet platforms where these men are being stationed on, and then nobody knows why that we have these types of things. And then, of course, Space Force comes along to make it all legit, and something that, we really don't know about. And it makes me wonder if there is a secret space program, that this new frontier has been an old frontier, that a lot of the UFOs we're seeing are a part of this type of, non-lethal weapons and other weapons that they're sending out in space, that Star Wars never really died, and that people like Firmage and Bigelow are these secret, and Musk, of course, and Bezos, or all these groups, or these guys that meet about the aerospace sector, and they have this whole economy unto themselves, where they're basically trying to create a more stable and reliable way of getting into space, because our space program, the one we know about, NASA, was pretty bad. Wasn't that great? And so they have these other guys that are hiding behind the UFO enigma to present and to create these types of machines that are out there right now and show up every once in a while, and we all go, "Oh, look, UFOs!" And they're not UFOs at all. They're basically ships that have been created by these millionaires.
And it is interesting because I would say that Bezos and Musk definitely. I'm not sure how into that Bigelow would have been, given some of the information I've received from people that were actually working at Bigelow Aerospace. It seemed to be not most on top of it organization. And I've just recently, he laid off most of the people that worked for him. So I'm not sure how in that game he necessarily was. Was it more of a kind of a, the Great Oz behind the curtain, creating this empire, and then he could do real estate deals over here, or do other, and maybe with Skinwalker Ranch, you get this property, and then you're the caretaker, and you let other contractors come in and test things in a real life scenario. So I wonder, if that might not be necessarily the case in some of the big boys.
Well, and there were other names too that in my processes, there were people like Robert Kiviat. I don't know if you remember him. He was another guy that definitely I talked with at one time. He talked with me. It was weird. Kiviat called me like out of the blue one time, thinking that I would do a TV show, and he never had me do it. But it was like he did this weird interview with me about Skinwalker Ranch and some of the UFO experiences I've had and all this stuff, and then he just kind of like disappeared. But Kiviat's another guy who was actually talking about how the government was developing anti-gravity technology. And this was back when I first started too, and I didn't know anything about Robert Kiviat until I worked with Rob McConnell on the X Zone, which was a Canadian show that he interviewed me from time to time in the 1990s when I was doing these internet things about after 1995, 96, and then Kiviat was talking about all this stuff too, and then it all comes back to there was something in the 90s, I would say from 95 to about 2000, where it seemed that there was some sort of a secret program going on that included things like Skinwalker Ranch, that included Area 51. That's why Area 51, in fact, Area 51 had legs in the 1990s. I don't even recall anything about Area 51 when I first started my show, and then I think it was people like Art Bell and others that were exploiting this, and of course Alien Autopsy and all these other things. And I'm like, it was almost like the 90s were the golden age of UFO investigations because of people like Art Bell and the X-Files and Chris Carter and everyone that was involved. So that was the heyday. And then, of course, everything went silent after the turn of the century, and now it's coming back again, and all of these old stories are new again because, people, allowed them to ferment like a good wine, and now they're pouring them out for everybody to consume, and we're getting drunk on misinformation.
Right. And that's exactly it. It's like we're, the Area 51. And when you look at how did these stories make it out to the media? How did they become such a hit? Who was behind promoting the stories? You see the same types of players. And I remember in my last interview with Junior Hicks, him talking about they had found some rods on the property, Sherman, and they looked like they could be spent fuel rods. Actually, Junior showed me a picture of that, and they found those, and then they went out. Bigelow had them going out on their hands and knees to try to dig these things up. It was very interesting, but Junior said to Bigelow, apparently according to Junior, hey, what is this? And he's like, first he gave him the story that this was an old part of a radio, and then one of the scientists involved with NIDS seeded the idea that this was, this has something to do with element 115 and Bob Lazar and all this stuff. And so it's like the same, small group of people is promoting the same type of stuff over and over again. And now you just have this new push to promote stuff that, in my opinion, I think is a red herring. And definitely disinformation. And with the case of the Storm Area 51, I looked at that and just thought, you have to be kidding me. That was a bit much.
Well, it was a bit much because, I said, why are we storming Area 51 when they've declassified most of it? We had T.D. Barnes on the show to talk about Oxcart, and it was no secret that, they were working on, projects in the Cold War. And what people don't understand is that all the alien activity wasn't going on at Area 51. It was going on at S4, which is adjacent to Area 51. So, and S4 is run by the Pentagon. It's between the CIA and the Pentagon. There are secrets that, I'm sure will be kept by people going to their graves, but there were many, like T.D. Barnes and others, that came forward, I think it was like in 2013. They were actually ready to talk and ready to say things about, what was going on. And it was no big secret that parts of Area 51 have been...
Right. Sorry, I've just got to cut you off right there.
Because okay, sure.
Go to break. I'm Erica Lukes here in UFO Classified with Clyde Lewis. You can check out my website for links to his website and his shows, his bio, everything. We will be right back.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to our last segment of UFO Classified. I want to thank my listeners from all over the world. I am getting more and more people messaging me and sharing stories with me and expressing their support. It's interesting because the more I go against the grain of ufology and some of the key players, the more I find, again, myself getting trolled and all sorts of stuff. But you must be doing something right when that starts to happen. I am here today with Clyde Lewis, who I've known for quite some time. He's from Utah, and so we have a really great connection and have shared stories about that. He hosts Ground Zero, which is available. It's on Monday through Friday from 7 to 12, and I will give you guys links for that. You have to listen to it. I love listening to Clyde because he is the consummate professional at what he does. He's got a great voice, great ideas, and he also understands that there is much more to the story with regard to Skinwalker Ranch and the Uinta Basin than we have been told. So, Clyde, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. We've been talking a lot about, different figures, Joe Firmage, Bigelow, Kelleher, Salisbury, and Hicks, and then also what kind of all the stories that, again, are being regurgitated and thrown up that are, I believe, distracting people from the truth. And when I cut you off, you were talking a little bit about the CIA. Mm-hmm. And so, please continue with what you were talking about.
Well, I mean, all the groups that are involved with this type of thing are the CIA, the DIA, the Pentagon, Area 51, of course, is a CIA operation. Pentagon runs the S4 areas of the Area 51 Groom Lake facility, and there are different areas that are more complex and intricate than you get from some TV show or some depiction. And I think a lot of people who are halfway into this only know a part of the story. That's the thing, is that people are on the periphery and they get a piece of the action and then they start using it as, like it seems like every earthquake that happens, they say it's the HARP project. Well, no, there are a lot of things that we need to we look into, or everything that comes out of the back end of an aircraft is a chemtrail. I just, and when you say, let's use a little bit of discernment here, people think that you're some shill for the New World Order, and I'm like going, no. I'm just trying to tell you. It's like right now I'm battling with people who are telling me, you need to tell people about COVID-19 and 5G, and I'm like going, 5G is not everywhere. I mean, it's 4LG right now, and if you see 5G on your phone, chances are you don't have 5G. It's called 5G evolution, and what they're doing is they're evolving into doing 5G. And so people are always, jumping on you and I don't know who these people are that are pushing these conspiracy theories, but it's almost like they come from out of nowhere, and you have to do damage control because you're thinking to yourself, who spreads these things? And you have to think that there's some sort of disinformation agents out there that are pushing this information, and people's cognitive biases tend to take over here, and people seem to think they know a little something about it when they know absolutely nothing about it, and it's because of these types of cover-ups and these types of using a UFO theme to push their message or to cover up what is going on in reality. I mean, it's always been, and if you read Blue Book, or if you're reading Sign or Grudge or any of these government, PR, these PR things that they did for UFO investigations, you'll know that a lot of times they were using UFOs as a cover for some secret operation.
Absolutely, and I keep trying to stress that because it's like people are, it's crazy to me that people are more willing to accept ET standing in front of you than the fact that the government is doing something covert.
Right.
And, and testing something. It's like, okay, I'm not sure how much evidence you need to look at things, but to make a rational decision. But people have such a need to believe that it's like they're willing to throw themselves on the dagger for this belief in extraterrestrials or, A, B, C, and D. We do it with religion, we do it with, all sorts of things. But with the UFO stuff, it gets really, really nutty. And I'm definitely not saying that I don't believe that there isn't something going on. I know there is. I've seen it. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to say it's
Right.
ET. It could be a combination of a lot of different things. But,
Right.
We have to do our due diligence and think logically sometimes, I would think.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things going on right now that, certainly, irritate me when I hear about them. Like when I hear, people that are religious say that the aliens are the great deception, that Satan is behind the alien deception. And they tell me because the aliens have landed and then they talk to abductees, they tell them, worship us, don't worship Jesus. I'm going, I've never in my whole life, the many years I've been investigating, have I ever heard an abductee tell me that an alien came down and told them to worship them and to reject Christ? Never, ever. And so when I hear these other people say, oh, yeah, that happens, I'm like going, where did you hear that? Because I've never heard that before. And I say, and I also say to people, too, I say, now, wait a minute. If aliens you can touch them and you can see them and you can, come in contact with them, they're not demons. They're actually beings that, certainly could be either, really, really well-produced AI or there's something else. And I said, and you mean to tell me that if they were to find little microbes on Europa tomorrow and they announced it to the world, you'd say that it's a satanic deception? I mean, these are the things that we need to, really, really, get on to people and say, you know what, that's interesting for your belief system, but there's no fact in it. And all those people that are pushing this great deception thing, or they say things like, well, that this is Project Bluebeam. And I say to them, well, there is no Project Bluebeam. Oh, yes, there is. I go, no, there's not. There was a guy named Serg Monahast who said that it was something that could be done. And yeah, they have the technology that could basically deliver some sort of deception if they wanted to do it. But listen, look at what COVID-19 is. Look what's going on with COVID-19. COVID-19 is the equivalent of an alien invasion, really. Because we have this alien threat this invisible enemy we know nothing about that's keeping people in their homes. Now, I had a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, who his name was Dr. Larry Johns. He was a guy that was a philosopher and a writer. And he once wrote a story about how the alien invasion would happen. He said there would be no UFOs. He said there would be no bodies. There would be no aliens knocking on the door of the White House. It would be an idea that would be planted in the minds of the people that would keep them in their houses and keep them from leaving and telling them that they need to prepare and to separate. Everything that he said in his document that he wrote a while ago, he said that if you can imagine that they're holding aliens captive in some bunker at Area 51 ready to release them into the public, they would first have to tell the public to stay indoors and to avoid any contact because, it would be enough to scare them into not going out because of the alien invasion. And I'm thinking, wow, COVID-19 is the perfect example of alien invasion, or it's the perfect example of War of the Worlds. Either way, it's something that we need to take into consideration if we're thinking about disclosure. Because I always tell people, I say, well, the novelty of aliens is always fun to talk about. The novelty of the UFO is always fun to talk about. But when the reality sets in, it's not fun anymore. It's reality. And it may be an ugly reality or a very scary reality for people once the reality is proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is. I mean, right now it's faith. For some people, it's their new spirituality. For some people, it's the kumbaya moment. For some people, it's, gathering together out in Joshua Tree to hear some guy talk about blue alien chickens in Antarctica. I mean, it's a number of things for everybody. But the reality is we may not want to know what the reality is. We may not want to know the direct reality, because once we find out and the novelty wears off, stuff just gets real. And when it gets real, people start panicking.
Or, I often wonder, because of some of the personal experiences that I've had, to me, it wasn't frightening. It was wondrous. It opened a lot of things up in me. And sometimes I wonder if there isn't an interaction with something that is really empowering, and that's what's being shut down. And it's just one of my many thoughts, but there's so many aspects.
Well, it can be empowering. It can be empowering for people. It can be fascinating for people, and it can be dangerous for people. I've always said that for the longest time, the aliens aren't here to save us; they're here to eat us. And I mean that in a very tongue-in-cheek way, because maybe the aliens are here to save us. But in reality, if you were a group of people or a group of aliens that had no interest in this planet whatsoever, kind of like what Arthur Clarke did with Rendezvous with Rama, either we'd be angry at the aliens for not giving a damn about us, or the aliens would treat us like cattle or like ants and are willing to squash us. So it's a matter of attitudes. It's a matter of, are we willing to open up and look at it as a faith-promoting experience, or an experience that would empower us, or are we going to look at it as something to be afraid of? And I think that we have learned our lesson with COVID-19. We are afraid. We are scared little bunnies, and we will do anything at a drop of a hat to actually believe that we're not strong. That we have to act on a part of self-preservation. It's about of appropriateness, and that's how things can form. People always ask, well, how did Hitler come to power? How did Mussolini come to power? It's all about conformity. It's all about what is going to keep you alive. What you see as appropriate, and then once the pain sets in, that's when people start rebelling. That's when people start rising up. That's when people start saying, we want to know the truth. That's when people start doing that. So the pain is not so severe that people are willing to demand disclosure. They've already got confirmation. You've got confirmation, Erica. I've got confirmation. We all. Knowing that the box office is going to always make a ton of money off alien time travel movies, superhero movies, that says that we all secretly have confirmation, and to say otherwise is hypocritical. So okay, it's confirmed. We've already decided, yes, there are aliens. Yes, there are beings out there that are watching us from a distance, or concerned about our welfare, or not concerned about our welfare. Now, what will disclosure bring? It will bring politics. It will bring the political nature of this, and the political nature is already the thing, as we can see with Skinwalker Ranch, that is destroying the story, that is destroying the camaraderie, that's destroying those who are willing to work together to find the truth. And so that's the problem. The politics are now settling into the UFO community and creating a division, a stigma, if you will. And this is something that could destroy us from within if we don't keep checks on it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I wanted to go back to something you mentioned, the satanic, the demonic, all of this stuff. And I remember, a few years ago, hearing about the fact that there were different groups that were trying to promote different narratives. And some of the people in the aviary, of course, were involved or are involved, and they're promoting and pushing people forward who have, that are believing that this is a spiritual thing. Demonic, demons, angels, or you've got other people involved that think it's, another thing and an extraterrestrial threat and different things. I mean, have you heard over the years about different groups with different agendas that they're pushing?
Well, you've got the Raelians that are pushing a spiritual nature of the aliens. You had Heaven's Gate, and we all know what happened to them. There are certain religions, like the Catholic Church, that have already said they've accepted the possibility. If you really want to get, and this is inside baseball for you and me, if you want to really, really dig, you look at the Mormon Church. They are certainly a church that is based on a supernatural event that could be interpreted as an alien visitation of a young Joseph Smith. I mean, his accounts his account, if you will, is no different than Saul of Tarsus' account or Ezekiel's account or anybody else that's had a vision where the bright light appears and immediately they're thrown to their knees and they're told, start a religion or, do this or do that. And that's why you have to look into the possibility that, yes, we may be dealing with, alien angel type of, intercession. I mean, we're dealing with the Jacques Vallée territory here when we're talking about the idea of trying to differentiate a spiritual experience from an alien abduction. And I always say to myself that, when you're looking at this and you're saying to yourself, if an alien comes down and decides it wants to extract my sperm or extract ova from a girlfriend or a wife or someone, that's not an angel doing that. I mean, unless angels have some sort of fascination with, making hybrid babies. I mean, that's not that. That's some biological entity that's invading. It's an invading force that, wishes to either do what they're doing because they have power over us or they want to have their species survive. So all these stories that we're hearing, I always tell people this. I mean, if you were to do an X-Files episode about a woman who comes forward and says, I'm pregnant and I didn't have sex. I'm a virgin. I'm pregnant. How'd that happen? Why am I carrying this baby? And they ask her, well, so what happened to you? Well, this bright light came into my room, and before I knew it, I was pregnant. And I have a boyfriend that doesn't believe me because, he's thinking that I'm lying. But reality is that I am carrying this child, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it. And then on the night that they want to give birth to the child, word gets out that they're going to give birth to this child, and people are thinking, no, we're not going to let you come into our hotel because this child is evil or whatever's going on here. So finally the baby's born, and it becomes this great philosopher, this great mind. And what you have is a Jesus Christ story. But it can be an X-Files story. It can be anything. And it's just the way we look at it. And I think we go from the Chariots of Fire to, an SUV driven by aliens with big headlights. I mean, it's the difference that, over time we evolve and we see things differently depending on the technology that's available. And so seeing a bright flash in the sky or a column of light or an angel or what have you, in a primitive mind, we can come up with anything. With the Renaissance painters, we can come up with anything, winged angels, if you will. But, even the idea of a human with wings is just as alien as something with big black eyes. I mean, it's the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I want to ask you, because we just have a few minutes left, but, when I'm looking at some of this and you hear stories and how much of this is conspiracy or whatever, but you hear about, my labs or you hear about different things with regard to that. What are your thoughts on my labs?
Well, I mean, I would not at all doubt that, if this is all, as true as we think, that the military or anyone involved with intelligence wouldn't exploit this and actually combine the overall, I guess you say, relationship between aliens and the military. And that's why you see a lot of UFOs over Air Force bases. That's why you hear a lot about, people who've had these abductions that have said that there was some sort of military entanglement. Hell, you can go back to Betty and Barney Hill. And, Barney had said that when he was in the spaceship, there was a guy in a Nazi uniform there. And I know that, now they're saying, well, that wasn't literal, but, hey, I remember the story. And he said that the aliens had a Nazi, guy on board that was basically directing them. We go back to Project Paperclip. We go back to all the other military entanglements we heard with aliens and the Vril and the channeling and all that stuff. And, there's a supernatural element to all this. There's an interdimensional element to all this, whether it be extraterrestrial, ultra-terrestrial, or whatever. And somehow something has got in, whether it be through ritual or through some other means, and it's been with us for a long period of time. we haven't been able to put our finger directly on it because it's so complex that most of the people, I'm sure, that have written books about the subject, that are the people that we always go see at these auditoriums, they don't even know, really. I mean, they speculate, and they speak with such passion and emotion that it sounds like that they're factual. But in reality, even if you've had an experience, you can't put into words that experience, nor can you even say for sure what that experience is without basically having to second guess yourself, whether you hallucinated or you were in a dream or something else. I mean, that's the bottom line. If people were more truthful about that, I think we'd be able to get to the bottom of it. But no, we have to, go in some lofty language and all this other stuff to describe what's going on, or we decide that we're going to, end up on, some talk show somewhere where we're going to talk about our situation, expecting to get fame, fortune, and what have you. When it doesn't come, people are going, well, wait a minute. How are all these people that are doing this making money? Well, no one knows, except you can have an inkling of suspicion that maybe somebody is backing them because they have an agenda.
And how often do you think that happens? Because you get people that say, "Oh no, this hasn't happened. That happened in the 50s and the 60s, where you had somebody behind the scenes, the intelligence community, that are kind of sponsoring these people or handling people." I mean, do you think that? I mean, how often do you think that really happens?
Probably a lot more than we want to admit, and that's the thing, is that I've been to these UFO conventions and gatherings, and I see who brings in the most money, and I see who brings in the most, heads sitting in an auditorium, and most of those people I don't trust. I don't even think their stories check out, actually. It's those people that you see that are honest, that aren't getting the people showing up, and the ones that are just kind of saying, well, this happened to me, not really making a big deal about it because they know that they're having a hard time describing, what happened to them. And they don't write books, and they don't, do talk shows, and they don't do that. They're just those people that, keep quiet or keep under the radar, or every once in a while talk to somebody about it. And those are the people that I seek out. Those are the people that I would rather talk to than these guys that are, behind their books and behind their egos and behind all this stuff trying to push that information.
Well, and it is interesting to me to always see how at every single one of these conferences it's the same freaking people. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like, I don't either organizers don't have a creative bone in their body. Or they're, I don't know. I don't get it.
Well, you know as well as I do, there are many groups out there that are trying to monopolize the information and saying that they have the truth. Well, here's the thing. I learned a long time ago that the truth is fleeting, that there's no ultimate truth anymore because people have twisted it with emotional with emotional opinions. They basically say it's my truth. Well, here's where I stop and I say, I think honesty is more important than truth right now, because anybody can say they have the truth, but if you're honest, I think that's a virtue that you need to have more so now than saying you have the truth. I get very, very, very skeptical of people who say, well, I have the truth. I have the truth. This is the truth. Right. I have the truth. And in fact, I stopped saying that a long time ago on my radio show, because back then it used to be the truth is out there and I have it. Well, you know what? No, I'm honest. I try to be as honest as possible. I don't know if I have the truth, but I certainly am trying to put together some things with my background and my knowledge that I want to deliver to my audience that I believe is factual, and if not, airtight. And there have been, I think maybe a few times where I've been wrong, but then I do a whole show about where I went wrong.
Right, and that is really critical, because most people that are promoting stuff, they will never be wrong because they have to, right. That's where they're making their money, and so right. It is good to have, to be humble that way, and to absolutely say what I know now is not I could learn something tomorrow and change everything. And that's happened time and time again in my career, and obviously for you. And I want to thank you so much for being here, Clyde. I enjoyed being on your show. I love it. I hope people listen to that. You can go to Ground Zero, and I again have all the links posted, and I appreciate you very much. I hope that you and your loved ones are safe throughout all of this, and blessings to everybody out there as well. Please be safe. Make sure you stick around for a wonderful night on KCOR. I'm Erica Lukes, and we will catch you next Friday night.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.